This is just to give you a snapshot and a bit of a call to arms around the communication strategy on CAFS. So, very quickly, we know that national awareness campaigns is important. This is what the Environmental Audit Committee at Westminster said. It's the single biggest tool to improve air quality. We've got a communications element, one of the 6 objectives in CAFS. So we've got an objective that you can see in yellow there, and 3 actions specifically around about communications. Particularly, I'm going to focus just very briefly on point 2 about developing a national awareness campaign. I think it has to definitely be built upon what Colin has just said there about positive campaigning, snappy messages, tying into existing campaigns. So there's a whole raft of work that's been recently undertaken that we're going to use as a basis for that. Just highlighting on what we already know, the climate change messaging that Greener Scotland and Scottish Government have undertaken, they've already identified for their research what we need to do and what we don't need to do. So, for example, make things easy to understand and get the bigger picture, but don't make the air quality initiatives weird or undoable, and don't make people feel bad. This has been proven through stakeholder feedback interviews, albeit from the climate change agenda. So I think we already know the path that we want to take. As has already been mentioned this morning, air quality is in the news, so thanks Volkswagen. Although I've not put a picture of them up yet, but I'll mention it just before we finish. There's also existing campaigns out there, for example, Environmental Protection Scotland with the Breathe Scotland and Breathe Better Together in London. So one of the meetings I'm going to be having immediately after this is with Greater London Authority about how they put together all the Breathe Better Together campaign as well. So there's a lot of work that's already been done there that we can piggyback on and take elements from. There was work that Par Hill Research had done in conjunction with London to support the development of their campaigning and, from a London perspective, and they've found that communication campaigns can modify driver behaviour, but there are clear barriers which include no clear linkages between air quality emissions and impacts and lack of alternatives. So this is a research that's already out there and is going to inform the communication strategy. As Colin's already said, who actually should be communicating the messaging? So we have to think carefully. Actually, should it come from a government official? And I've got a question mark beside that. Would you or the general public actually believe if I had to stand up and say air quality matters? Or should it come from the medical community, scientists, NGOs? We all have a role to play, but I want that message, I think, to be consistent. And I think certainly there's this issue about agents of change and employers taking responsibility within their own travel plans and messaging to the staff that they employ. So, very briefly, we think we've identified 3 key audiences that are outlined in the CAFS document. General public, government, both national, regional and local, and businesses. So those are the 3 audiences I think that the communication strategy will be looking at. I guess we want to have a goal where individuals are well informed and responsible for the contribution they make, but that there's a specific focus on health and well-being throughout the messaging. I think I'm pretty confident on this point that it has to be health focused first before we get into the environment or the consumer impact that certain organisations might be wanting to promote. So there's an approach there and a task to look at personal actions. So just in summary, I just wanted to give a flavour of where the programme of work might look like in this communication strategy. This is my thoughts on the programme that might be, again, too ambitious, or others in the room might have issues with these dates. But I think to start off with, I think we want to be looking at what the work packages would be within a communication strategy and try and get to an outline of that strategy by March 2016. That means is, again, parallel work in conjunction with the various frameworks that we're developing, but I think that's again ambitious but doable given the size of that Scotland is. So perhaps looking at a launch of the first phase of campaigning round about June 2016 onwards. I won't get too hung up on those dates, but at least gives us an indication of where we want to go. So just in finishing off, this was Stephen Covey, not related to air quality at all, but more about how to be effective. And I quite like this quote to sum up, that if people don't trust, then you lose that empowerment. So if you don't empower people without trust, you won't get the ability to influence their behaviours. And I think that chimes well for me with sitting with air quality. So, in summary, what I would say is CAFS has a communication strategy. There's an ambition to put an air quality strategy together. I think in this room, we all have a role to play in both putting that together and getting those messages out. I think, Colin, you've already had a go at phrasing for comments on what that strategy or comments might look like. I think at the weekend, I think my line that I came up with was Mayor Clean Air. But that's basically what I spend my weekends doing, is coming up with phrases like that. So there's something to be said there about the communication messaging. I think I'll finish it off there.